Hey everyone, it's Layne here with Moreno Real Estate Group. I'm joined by the owner, Rick Moreno, and we're having a great year in 2017. We're finishing up. We're heading on into 2018, and I really just wanted to pick Rick's brains. He's been mentoring me for over a year now, and he's taught me so much, and I wanted to kind of do a mentoring session and really get to know him personally and to kind of share this information out, with the world, because he's just done so much for me, and I want everyone to really have that valuable information. All right, so my first question for Rick is, pretty basic. So how did you get into real estate?
Actually, my high school teacher, I was a senior in high school. I had taken an advanced, graphic design, micromedia kind of computer animation course. And I was a little bit cynical with my teacher, and I made fun of him about him not making enough money. At that point, I wasn't mature enough, Brandon, to understand the meaning of hard work the way I should have. And he kind of laughed at me. He said, I make double or triple of what I make as a teacher in real estate. And I said, yeah, right. If you were in real estate, you would not be doing this, and yada, yada, yada. It kind of led into another snowball effect. And then the day of graduation, he had invited me and my parents over to his house. And not that I was ever driven by material things, but when I saw his house, I realized that he was not lying, that he was telling the truth. And at that point, that's when he kind of gave birth to the love and passion of acquiring wealth in a way where I wasn't busting my tail every single day, and I had to do it in a different way. And so he's the one who kind of started that, my high school teacher. And then from that point on, then I went to California, and then it was born.
Mm-hmm. So I know we've kind of talked about it, obviously. You come from very humble beginnings. Overall, with your parents and everything that you've accomplished up to this point, and you still remain extremely humble. So what's allowed you to really just stay grounded?
You kind of have no choice when you come into my parents' household, where you have soul food, home cooked meals every day, where she's not impressed by what you have, she's impressed by what you give. And so as a result, my family, my dad's a pastor, my grandfather was a pastor, great-grandfather was a pastor. So for me, the spirit of giving was always something that was instilled in us. And my parents were never impressed by what you had in your bank account. So that always kept me grounded. There's times when I try to slip away from that, and then they kind of slap in the back of the head and say, hey, you come from immigrant parents who came here the right way and did something of themselves and allowed their kids to just blossom into something great. So I achieved because of my parents. It wasn't because I was a special kid or whatnot. They just were very strict on what they were trying to do with me, and thankfully, I'm thankful for everything that they provided me on that platform.
So coming from like a religious background, where your dad was a pastor, your grandfather was a pastor, were you also involved in that?
Yeah, I had a huge stuttering problem when I was maybe 15, 16, 17 years old. I would be afraid to do any public speaking or even just speak to certain people. If I was speaking fast or speaking with a girl or speaking with someone, I would find myself stuttering a lot. And I would sit at church next to my mom because I didn't want to interact with a lot of people. But then I remember I had a camp in Tucson, Arizona, and I think my mom and dad and a lot of other people were influencing me at that point. And then at that point, a fire lit in me. And I became very heavily involved at 16 years old, 17 years old. I was already leading my church group. And then I was preaching, believe it or not, a lot of people don't know I was a young preacher, preaching in different cities and states. And it got to the point that public speaking was so natural for me that I had to explore of some sort. So my dad, pushed that and kind of helped me in what I'm doing right now.
I think that's great. It's very humbling to just hear that and see where you are. You still motivate people. You want to mentor people, and obviously that's tied to your beginnings. And I think that's great. You've done that for me. You've done that for a lot of the young realtors that we have at our group. So I really do think that's amazing. And I know you touched on another part of your life where you did have to move to Los Angeles. What took you there?
Well, my football coach, he said, I want you to be different, Rick. I want you to not come back to this town, this school, until you made something of yourself. He didn't want me to be the typical kid that came from a small town and just would hang out at high school games when I was 19 and 20 years old. He wanted me to come back with a purpose. And so I kind of took that word, and I didn't come back. I left to California. My family lived there, Southern California, And that's kind of where the game started. And I bought my first house, when I was about to turn 20. I was still 19, and I was struggling. I was working at Robinson's May selling shoes. I was painting with my cousin. I was doing every meaningless job possible just to try to survive and pay the mortgage on that. So it was rough. It was rough early on, but I knew that I just, two things. I didn't want to take money from my parents, and I knew I didn't want to rent. So those were the only two things I knew at that time. So
now this was all during while you were a full-time student.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's crazy. So when you did come back, you became a teacher. You transitioned into that part of your life, and you were also a coach. So based on that experience, how has that helped you become a mentor to someone like me and to everyone else?
Well, I honestly think, Brandon, let me preface this, I honestly think my skill set doesn't lie in real estate. I just work hard. I like to learn, I like to study. My skill set does lie in having a passion to help others. That's where my skill set lies. That's one of the few skill sets that I have to look at someone who probably doesn't have enough faith in what they're trying to do. Maybe it was in a rut financially, in a rut with their family or whatnot. And that's where I'm able to tap into that skill set. So that's my gift. Real estate is just something I like to do, I love to do, and I don't even think I'm that good at it. I just think I work really, really hard at it. And so the coaching aspect, I realized because my dad, my grandfather, they're full of fire, and that's what I brought to the coaching table, where I was mentoring someone and actually coach. I just didn't put up with the idea of Brandon Layne giving me 60% when he could be giving me 100%. I always demanded 100 at practice or everywhere else. So as a result, that's kind of how I prepared myself as well. I always make sure that I was prepared so that the people around me knew that every time I talked to them, that they were getting someone who was game face ready. And that's kind of the dynamic that I lended myself by.
So I know you talked about people having their faith tested and whatnot. When you moved to New York, walk me through how you even ended up in New York, out of all places, LA, now New York.
Yeah, the human spirit's a unique thing in the sense where we are programmed to remain comfortable. And when you're in a situation where you feel that you're comfortable, you're set, your family's good, the bills are paid, then you're not going to achieve, in my opinion, true success. And that's not talking about financial success. That just means evolutionary success. You're talking about mindset, everything. And so when I come from a town that was 2,000 people. We had one hallway in our high school. I don't even know how many graduates we had in our high school, maybe 25 to 30 graduates in our high school. We came from a small town, and one moment to the next I said, I want to live in New York City, and I want to make it in the biggest city that in the country, the mecca of real estate. And I didn't know one single soul. I didn't have a job, and that uncomfort level made me so scared, but at the same time so driven to take it to the next level. I realized that if I remained where I was at, there was no way possible that I was going to achieve full potential. And I'm still trying to do that, achieve that full potential, because I think once you get comfortable, I think humans need to ruffle their feathers, their lifestyle, every 3, 4, 5 years, because every 3, 4, 5 years you are getting so used to what you're doing, you become a master of that 3 to 4, 5 years, that sooner or later you're going to have to punch yourself in the gut and say, I got to do something different. So if you're not used to talking on the phone, you better start talking on the phone. If you're not used to networking, you better start networking. If you're not used to taking a different viewpoint on a certain type of industry, then you try to venture into that. And that's why I kind of do that. Every 3, 4, 5 years, I ruffle my feathers and I try to make a new shift and a new change.
Absolutely. You said the word potential, and we have this conversation often.
All the time.
So,
I hate that.
Walk me through that dynamic on why you don't like that word. But you said it right now, your full potential. So what does that mean to you?
I absolutely hate the word potential. Just because my mentor hated that word, the people that I was around hated that word. Potential is just, in my opinion, just unachieved effort. And it's an individual who, how many times have you seen someone that is an amazing athlete, is an amazing speaker, is amazing at something, but then you look at them 4, 5, 6 years later and they're not doing anything. You see valedictorians, straight A's in high school, and all of a sudden you walk into them 4, 5 years, 7 years later, and they're not doing anything. They're working in meaningless jobs that they're completely hating. They hate their life. So I realized that I had to make a shift. High school to me came very easily, and I was kind of lazy, and I still got decent grades, but I was operating on potential. And I think you need to surround yourself around individuals who tell you, Brandon, your shit stinks. You have to get after it. You're not achieving your potential. And when someone else looks at you straight in the eye and tells you that, I think that's when you realize that the human spirit and the human body is a very resilient system. Mm-hmm. Until you stretch it completely to the point of no return, you won't realize how much you have in your tank. So that's kind of why I hate potential.
So was this your mindset even growing up, or did you have to meet someone that really lit a fire under your ass for you to really think like this and elevate you to the next level? If so, who was it?
Yeah, you know, I when I moved to New York City, I removed myself from the friends that were my age, and I started hanging around older individuals who were already making it. I realized one thing from my mentor. He said, you don't know anything. Though you think you know something, you don't know what I know. And so when he put things into perspective that way, I give that advice to a lot of young people. I was very distraught with what's going on with the millennial generation, kids your age. They think they know it all, they think everything, they just think the sky's the limit for them, which is great. I love that dreamer mentality, but they're not willing to humble themselves and take advice from individuals who are already been there, done that. And I'm a firm believer it's all right to be a copycat as long as you copy the right cat. You've got to mold yourself around the people who already, it's not if it's not a broken wheel, you don't recreate it. Look at someone who's modeling that behavior and examine them and then tweak it to your own plan, and then that's when I think you'll achieve success. But you got to stop hanging around individuals that are exactly in your same level. You got to cut the fat, trim it, and then go with people that are a little bit above you. Absolutely.
So you met your mentor in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me the greatest wisdom he probably ever told you. What was it?
Very good question. There were so many things I wish I could share all of them at once, but it's the same thing that resonated with what my dad always said. My dad's favorite animal is the eagle. The eagle is a very solitary, lonely animal. They operate at its potential in isolation. And my mentor Irving, he was the same way. I always saw him networking with people, but his brain pattern and his thought process was always in isolation. And that's what made him a quick decision maker. So he always said, examine yourself in isolation, rejoice in isolation, pray on your own, reflect in isolation. And I think a lot of people, we seek too much advice from so many avenues, but you're the master of your own destiny. And so I think when he would tell me that, that's when I would realize, okay, I gotta get after it. This guy's waking up at 4:30 in the morning. He's 58 years old, and I'm a chump next to him. He would knock on my door and he'd be like, "Why aren't you up?" And then he would just leave. He's like, "You're not ready." And so I just think we haven't found enough people. A lot of people talk the talk, they fail to walk the walk because they haven't found that right mentor who just light a fire and kind of get after him every so often.
So he's obviously the one that took you to the next level. And when you did come back from New York, did he give you a sense of purpose to really start flipping? You got your broker license and whatnot. Was he a key piece to that?
Yeah, he was the one who said, "Look, you're doing very well in New York. You're doing very, very well. But if you go back, you're going to feel like you're taking 10 steps backwards. But then you're going to catapult yourself." And that's a piece of advice that I give to a lot of people. Sometimes the storm is in your way and you feel like there's no end in sight. But in the eye of that storm, there's peace. And during that peace is when you really have to understand, where am I trying to get to? A lot of people, they have these goals and dreams, but they don't say, I'm going to get after it. And so I think when he put that piece for me, it made sense. Like, I felt like a failure when I came back from New York and I went back to Texas. Not because I didn't love Texas, but I just felt like, what better place for me to make it big than New York City? And so when I came back, it was a self-reflection piece, and I realized that there was no other way. I had to grind. I had to get after it to the best way possible.
And I mean, overall, you stay humble, like I said, and you went to graduate school at New York University. You had a full schedule. You were busy with coaching, teaching 7 AP classes, like you told me. You're also taking graduate school classes and PhD classes. So you were just tested from the get-go. Once you got there, you were there for 4 or 5, I think maybe 6 years. You might have told me. How were you able to get through that?
What I learned from New York was that I wasn't as good as I thought I was. Coming from a small pond, And not that I thought it was a big fish, but I just, like I said, high school came a little bit easier for me. I didn't have to study a lot for exams. When I went to NYU, I realized that people were wealthy, number one, and people were smart. And when you combine wealth with intelligence, then the socioeconomic level is way superior than what I've ever experienced. One of my friends, his dad was owner of a huge hedge fund company. My other friends, they had a huge mansion estate in the Hamptons. I came from the sticks. So there was no way possible that I could measure up in a socioeconomic level to them. So it humbled me, and the only way I knew how to compete was to grind. I'd wake up every day, and so when I would meet my mentor at 4:30 in the morning, he realized you're operating on 3 hours of sleep, then the people who are above you, they have it better. They had a silver spoon in their mouth. They don't need those the short hours of sleep, but you're going to have to cut your hours in half if you want to compete with someone like that. And I realized that I had a disadvantage by birth. I didn't choose my parents. I was blessed by my parents, but as a result, I realized as a minority, I mean, there was only one Mexican American in my cohort, in my graduating cohort at NYU, and I was it. I realized that I had to do something different. I had to just shift my focus.
So that became your competitive advantage. And when you came to El Paso, do you think that's what gave you the edge against? I mean, I want to call it your competition because you really don't care about that stuff.
Yeah, I don't really care about rankings, city rankings, data like that. I really care about my own data. I don't really care about anyone else's. And I think that's where we get lost in the shuffle. As long as you're beating yourself from what you were doing last year, I think you'll be fine. And what I always tell you, wake up, beat the day, conquer the week, and just destroy the year. You've got to beat the day.
So overall, the last piece of advice, I want to share with our audience. What do you think? I mean, everyone's definition of success is completely different. So, what do you think is one discipline or one key habit that can elevate someone, and whether it be their career, financial, or their life in general? What advice would you give that person?
You know what? Someone wants to work out, they want to stay fit or lose weight or make a lot of money. I know recently I talked to someone that wanted to make $300,000, $400,000 a year and lofty goals, or someone who's, let's say someone who wants to make 50 and they're making $25,000 a year. There has to be a shift. There has to be that paradigm shift. You have to literally jump the canyon in order for you to make that quantum leap. And in order for you to do that, you got to exercise the right beast in you. Right? And Irving would always tell me there's two beasts that exist within every human being on this planet. The first beast is the individual who is the evil side of you. Don't wake up, Brandon. Go out and drink. Go do those things. Be lazy. Don't do your homework. That's the evil side of you, or that's the weak beast in you. You feed it, you feed it, you feed it, and sooner or later it's going to become a classically conditioned habit. Then the other beast, he said, is the one that's not fed enough. It's the beast that is good in you, that wants to cheat, that wants to provide for your mom, that wants to provide for your dad, that wants to do other things. But he said, which beast wins in a fight, Rick? Every single human has those two beasts. Which one wins? And I didn't know the answer. And he said, the one you feed the most. The one you feed the most. So you feed the right beast, I promise you, waking up at 4:30 in the morning is going to seem so simple for you because you know that there's a final outcome. So if you want to shift your body, you got to shift your mind. Very simple.
I'm always mind blown when we talk, and I'm glad we can kind of share that valuable information to not just me, but to everyone watching. So I want to say thank you, and I appreciate you joining us. Have a great day and enjoy your holidays.
God bless everyone. I'll see you guys soon.